it's always your hand that's holding the paintbrush. So, you're always going to be kind of like putting your personality or your flavor, or your chemistry into whatever it is that you do, regardless of whatever medium it is.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
I am Adam Bryant.
And Adam, you have a number of different musical projects. The one we're going to be discussing the most today is Cave Dweller. How would you describe the music that you make with that project?
That's a good question. It's 3 separate LPs, and each one kind of has its own flavor. So this most recent one tends to run more in the genre of, I'd say, like doom, sludge metal, maybe drone. There's some neo-folk elements in it. I try not to stick to one genre anyway, to not pigeonhole myself. So somewhere within that kind of realm of stuff.
And across your different projects like Pando, Salt on Sunday, Unfold, and Cave Dweller, do you feel like there's a shared sensibility? Do you feel like there's something common to all those projects?
Yeah, I think any musician kind of has like a particular like personality that they kind of imprint on whatever it is that they're doing. It's always your hand that's holding the paintbrush. So, you're always going to be kind of like putting your personality or your flavor, your chemistry into whatever it is that you do, regardless of whatever medium it is. I can usually tell when I'm listening to different bands, even if it's somebody that's, mixing it up by playing like a different instrument on one album. I can usually tell who it is when there's something being created. So like a good example that I like to use is like Aaron Turner from like Isis and Sumac. I can immediately tell when he's playing in a band or something because he has like a specific tone and a specific way of playing that always ends up imprinting itself on whatever it is that he's doing.
Beyond your specific way of playing, and I assume you play all the instruments yourself, right?
Yeah.
Including drums, or are those programmed drums?
Yeah, no, I play drums.
Okay, cool. Besides the way that you specifically play drums, do you feel like your aesthetic is more lo-fi, maybe raw, and that's the common ground that all your projects have?
I think so. Some of it's intentional, some of it's not. Some of my earlier stuff was definitely not intentionally lo-fi. It was just what I had access to for tools. But I think that I tend to gravitate more towards raw production than I do like really pristine, overproduced stuff, especially when it comes to metal music or heavier, more abrasive music. I think that heavier music in general just sounds better when it's more raw because it's honest. It's not like kind of like that pristine quality. There's a lot of stuff like in the metalcore genre and things like that I think sound particularly soulless because it's kind of overprocessed or over compressed, bunch of limiters popped on it and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned that this latest Cave Dweller album has more sludge and doom elements. I'm curious, when you started the project, what were your intentions? Because it wasn't that sludgy or that doomy originally, right?
No, the first 2 albums were a lot more, I guess, mellow is the appropriate word I would use. Like the first album in of itself within the series was entirely folk. It was kind of like my first solo project outside of Pando. And then the follow-up to that, Invocations, was still like primarily folk, but a lot more experimental. There was a lot more spoken word passages and kind of messing with oddball synthesizers and field recordings. So this one is definitely the most abrasive of the 3, for sure. And as far as like my approach towards it goes, I think so. I initially had no expectation going into the creating process of this. It started with a recognition that I needed to create a new album. And I think I started with kind of like heavier tones because kind of like my default when I am just kind of playing and jamming around and stuff is to go towards like heavier sonic sounds. And it just felt appropriate for the Cave Dweller project because of some of the other artifacts that I was including within those heavier sounds that still felt a part of Cave Dweller. And I think the other major component of it is that the Cave Dweller project in of itself is kind of an accommodation of my novel that I've been working on for the past like 7 years or so. So the Cave Dweller material, a lot of the lyrics and passages are all things that are happening within the novel itself or included within the novel. And so what Showing Teeth is kind of the more dissonant, gnarly parts of the novel. So it just felt natural for me, at least, making it.
So, is the novel and the music that you're creating, is it like a multimedia experience? Is it something that's meant to go together?
It could be, yeah. You could listen to them separate. You could listen to the novel, or not listen to the novel. You could listen to the music separately and read the novel separately, and they work independent of each other. But I think that if I ideally get the novel published and people are able to read it, then I think going back and listening to the album, they would be able to kind of understand where some of the commonalities within at least the literature proponents are.
Do you, in your life outside of music, do you work as a writer? Do you write fiction?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
I've been asking that question for 5 years. I interviewed a lot of like metal bands who write like sci-fi themes and stuff like that. You're the first person who actually does.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I would have figured that, one of my big go-tos over the past couple years has been blood incantation.
Right, yeah.
I would definitely think that some of those guys write sci-fi.
I think people are intimidated by writing because writing, there's a lot of, specifically writing fiction. There's a lot of world building. There's a lot of creating a story arc. It's actually a lot more difficult than you can criticize a movie, but a movie has to do certain things very quickly within, especially if you're working like sci-fi or fantasy or horror. Do you know what I mean? To establish the reality, and writing good fiction, I think, is a lot harder than a lot of people think.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly difficult. It's also emotionally taxing. It's a medium that you're very much alone. It's not like you can very easily be like, here, just read this like 300-page thing and get back to me on like some commentary or something. Like, what do you think of it or whatever? It's a daunting task to take on. And it's also a lot to ask someone to give criticism, because you're asking someone to, spend a lot more time with, the medium as a whole than, an album that at most usually is like 45 minutes or an hour, So yeah, absolutely. And it's also, because of that, you're very much alone. You have to sit with yourself. It has to be quiet most of the time. I have a hard time working if I have like a ton of noise. So yeah, it's a very different process.
You mentioned ISIS. Did you grow up listening to heavy music, or did you come from a different background like punk or folk or anything like that?
Oh yeah, dude. Like when I was, I don't know. I think like my first band in middle school, so like real young, when I realized that like screaming and music was cool, was like Linkin Park or something. I think like up until that point, I would just listen to whatever it was that my parents put on. But I was also exposed to a lot of different kinds of music really early on. My grandmother was into jazz and a lot of like Italian folk music and kind of like the Rat Pack and stuff like that. And then my mother loved like Prince, and my father listens to a ton of different music. So I would hear everything from like Queen to Willie Nelson to Iron Maiden to Celtic Frost to Duran Duran. Like, I was just exposed to a lot of different kinds of music early. And I think that's just how my interest in music started. And then from kind of starting to like get into it myself, I think the first album that I actually like purchased on my own was Tool's Lateralis. And from there, I think the album that made me actually like physically pick up a guitar and like start playing was Oceanic by Isis.
Okay. What was it about that made you want to make your own music?
Which one? Oceanic?
Oceanic, yeah.
The fact that like the juxtaposition on the album was so interesting to me. I remember like hearing it and thinking like, oh shit, like something is only as heavy as it is when it's juxtaposed to something that's pretty. So I liked kind of those like introspective moments where it was kind of like these like in between Pink Floyd kind of delays and stuff like that. And then it would gravitate into like these really, really heavy tones. And I think that was like, it was like his whole like down tune drop B sound that like really was like, oh shit, this is awesome.
Your music is referred to as experimental, and you referred to some of the previous Cave Dweller releases as experimental. Do you feel like every time you sit down to write a song, you're trying something new, even if it's just new for you?
Yeah, I don't like to revisit old stuff. I don't think that it just doesn't suit me. I don't know if that's ADHD or what it is, but I think I get bored really easily, and I don't like to repeat myself. Music, like a lot of art mediums for me, whether it's painting or writing or whatever, is an expulsion of energy. And whatever I'm feeling at the time is what I'm feeling at the time. And it's kind of an outlet for me where it might not necessarily be like a feeling that I want to revisit, you know? Like the first Pando release that we did, Negligible Senescence, was like about the 5 stages of grief for me after the passing of my grandmother. So like moments like that are not necessarily like feelings or sensations that I want to experience. And that's kind of what music is to me. Music to me is it's a response in the same way that kind of like, you know, you playing drums and you hit the snare, it's about the way that your hand and the stick responds to the top of the drum and the way that the recoil goes off of it. It's a response to the previous brushstroke. So yeah, it's not that I'm like necessarily like trying to go out of my way to do something different. It's just, it feels natural because I don't want to revisit that. I also think that like there's plenty of bands that do that already, so I don't really need to. Like if that's your thing and you want to continue to create the same kind of music, I think that's awesome. Especially if you've built up a fan base that has like an expectation of your material and what you're putting out. I think that a lot of like touring musicians definitely have that. Like if a band like Mastodon suddenly came out with like a folk album, it would probably be pretty weird. So I just, the way that I create music allows me the opportunity to kind of write music this way. And it's just natural for me.
As far as handling all the instruments yourself, was that just a function of where you live? Do you live in a place where it's difficult to find collaborators, or do you just prefer to perform all the instruments on your recordings?
It's definitely the first one. I live in New England, and most people, when I say New England, they usually think like, oh, Boston.
Right. Yeah.
But New England is a lot bigger than that.
There's also Worcester.
Yeah, yes.
Shout out to my buddy in Worcester who's listening to this.
Yeah. No, I live actually near the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, and I'm kind of surrounded by mostly like state forest. And there's like some pretty decent music scenes, especially like towards like Northampton and areas like that. But a lot of them are more like indie and folk, and it's harder to find musicians that are on the same, I don't want to say wavelength, because I don't want to make it sound like, it's just a bunch of assholes out here.
Right.
Because it's not. It's just, it's a lot of musicians have kind of, at least out this way, have the expectation that like, we're going to do this and we're going to rehearse it and we're going to continue to rehearse it until it's muscle memory, and then we're going to perform it live. And it's actually something that I've kind of like fought with a lot. The idea of doing like live shows and stuff. And it's just, I view it as like when you're doing something live, it stops being about the audio and becomes more about the visual.
Yeah.
And again, I don't see anything wrong with that, but I would prefer, and I do prefer, I'm very picky about any kind of shows that I go to, because I prefer it that if I'm going to go see a show, especially with the prices of shows now, that I want to see like a performance. I would much rather go to see a band that I don't regularly listen to if that band puts on like an incredible show, like theatrics or something. I would rather do that than go to a concert, spending whatever for money, and watch the band play the songs exactly the same way as they do on the album, when I could just stay at home and listen to the album and not have to deal with a bunch of people. So I think of like bands like, for example, like Behemoth. I don't like listen to a shit ton of Behemoth at all, but I bet you Behemoth puts on a killer show. I've never seen them live, but from what I've seen, like, YouTube and stuff like that, there's theatrics, there's pyrotechnics. They use like paint and stuff like that. Like something like that is interesting to me to see. I would much rather go to something that does that becomes an experience, rather than just going to listen to a band in a different setting.
Yeah. You touched on this a little bit, but when you start writing songs, do you always start on the guitar?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't. It's different. I mean, I think a guitar is kind of like the easiest thing to immediately grab. But sometimes I start with just a field recording. Sometimes I'm out on a hike or something like that, and I hear sounds that are just like inspirational for me, and I go off of that. Sometimes I start with it just being writing out lyrics. Sometimes it's piano. It's almost never drums first. I feel like drums is always the thing that like ends up coming later. You have to figure out the tune first and then go from there. But yeah, it's different things. Just depends on whatever I'm feeling at the time.
Okay. Do you use a DAW or anything like that? Something like Pro Tools to help you write your songs and assemble your songs?
Yeah, I use Logic X is my preferred DAW. I've recorded a couple bands and stuff like that as well. So it's been kind of like where I started with Pando. Like I said, like our first record was literally entirely recorded with like a cell phone and like a Tascam Porta Studio. And then afterwards, I like kind of finagled it to work on like Audacity to mix everything together. So, over time, I acquired like better equipment and got more versed in recording techniques and mixing and production and everything in between. So it's been a bit of a learning curve, but yeah, I primarily use Logic X. But for the most part, as far as like, using it as a thing to like screw around with, like as like a blueprint, if that's what you're talking about, like a backbone kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I really try my best to not be in front of a screen as much as possible. Like I've even like I went out of my way to get like an old typewriter from the 60s just to not be at the screen so often. Most of it just has to do with the fact that like I get like headaches and everything. But yeah, I like to mock up different things. Like I'll come up with an idea, whether, like I said, like a guitar riff or a piano piece or something, and just record it as like a rough first draft, like on my phone, and see how it sounds, how it works. Sometimes that recording from the cell phone ends up being the thing that it ends up being in the track. I'm not opposed to just like, letting the honest thing, if it works, it works. I'm not trying to find like the most pristine sounds or anything. And I think that's actually like really important given like kind of the nature of artificial intelligence making its way into music charts and everything now.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to what you're saying about a lot of music that's, not specific to any one genre, but, I think across the board, a lot of music is very digitally created. The drums are quantized. A lot of the performances are just, copied and pasted. And so it was kind of like we've spent so much time listening to music that's becoming more and more computer sounding that it was a matter of time before someone decided just to have a computer make it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, this is kind of an aside, but the Tascam, the Porta Studio, was that like an 8-track or something?
It was a 4-track. It was like a little.
Okay.
What the hell was it? A Tascam Porta Studio, I think a 404, and it was just 4 tracks. So I had to learn how to like, once we filled up those 4 tracks, you have to bust them down, and then that's it. That is the thing. So it became permanent, and that's like some of that quality of making something permanent, I think, is like really important in the creative process. I remember when we were working on the Pando album Rights, I became overwhelmed at one point because like if you have access to a DAW, as I'm sure it gets like crazy overstimulating the amount of stuff that you can do. It's absurd. And sometimes having too much of something ends up being crippling. It does the opposite of what it's supposed to do. So I think the ability to make something permanent, to like own, this is potentially a mistake, but you got to own it, and kind of sacrificing that is a really important quality in creation. It's actually one of the other reasons why I ended up getting a typewriter for writing my stories and everything, because, you can't go back and nitpick every single thing that you write. It's just immediate.
So at the time of our conversation, there will be a new Cave Dweller album called Showing Teeth, released, I think, in a couple hours.
Yeah.
It's coming out through Aesthetic Death. We spoke a little bit about your intentions for this album. Going into this, did you feel like you really wanted to do something different than what you did in the past? At least with this project?
No, that wasn't even the intention behind it. It was just, like I said, it with the events of things that are happening in the novel at the point. So how do I explain it? It's like Cave Dweller, the albums coincide with the parts of the novel. So the novel is in 5 parts, and parts, the prologue and the majority of part 1 feel appropriate for what the first Cave Dweller album is. Like setting the tone, allowing the ambience to kind of exist, and kind of reflective. And then parts 2 and 3 of the novel are more kind of like the strangeness of the events that are happening. And it is kind of a horror novel. It's to me, it's like very inspired by a lot of like A24 like horror films, like Hereditary and stuff like that.
Okay.
Robert Eggers. I love Robert Eggers.
Yeah.
So it has kind of like a slow brooding to it that creates ambience, and not about jump scares or anything like that, just building to kind of like this, chaotic end climax. And that's what, Showing Teeth is. Showing Teeth is the last two parts of the novel.
Are the spoken word segments, are they passages from the novel?
Yeah, they are, actually.
Okay. Is the novel called Cave Dweller or Showing Teeth?
The novel is called With Teeth. Cave Dweller is actually one of the major characters within the novel. The main antagonist of the novel is called the Cave Dweller.
Who did you get to do the spoken word passages?
That was Stuart Harris on this record in particular. And Stuart Harris has done stuff on, I think, like Hive Mind. And he's like done a few different projects under the Aesthetic Death label. That's actually how I got into talking to him. And he's also a writer. He's a poet. So we would kind of like for a while bounce ideas off of each other and send each other our work. And I sent him a copy of my novel. He gave me like some really great criticism and everything. Yeah, so we've become kind of like pen pals back and forth, which has been really nice. And I asked him if he would do the voice of the Cave Dweller for me. And he did. And so those passages on that album, that's what those are to me. The first passage in track 1 is his own poem that he wrote. And then the last spoken word bit on the last track is directly from my novel. He's acting as the entity, the Cave Dweller.
Are there any other collaborators on the album that you want to talk about?
My wife did vocals as well in the last track, Panacea, and she's contributed vocals a couple of times, mostly from me just like nagging her to help out. But yeah, anytime that I've ever needed like kind of accompanying female vocals, gone to her.
That's awesome. So as you mentioned, you recorded this album yourself all the way up to the mastering?
Yeah.
Production-wise, what did you want for the sound of the album?
I wanted it to sound at least like it was, recorded in the same place as the first two albums. At least when it comes to mastering, I like everything to sound like it came out of the same studio. My go-to inspiration for recording will always be Albini. Any kind of attempt at recording drums, I've attempted to use some of the same techniques that he does. Mind you, I do not have access to the same expensive microphones as he does. But yeah, that has always been kind of like my go-to, especially watching how he recorded the guitar tones for the last Sun record, Pyroclasts. That was really inspirational.
Is Albini's approach very, very dry? Like, is it a lot of like, no overdubs, no reverb, just, record in the room and add all the instruments? That's
pretty much what it seems like, especially if you watch like his commentary from when he was doing the stuff under Shellac. We talked about recording Nirvana's material, Slint, and the drums on Neurosis's albums, the stuff that he's produced for Neurosis, I personally can hear the difference. It's the most noticeable with the drum tones, like the fat bottom end from the kick, and kind of like the wood tones, I guess. Like you can tell that it's an instrument made from wood, and I like that quality. There's an honesty to it. So yeah, at least as far as like from what I've seen, he's fairly dry in his tones and about kind of maintaining that like human quality to it. I remember he, like, in one interview kind of gave a little bit of a rant, like 80s hair bands and kind of like the coldness of the 80s, how everything was kind of just like drenched in reverb and kind of like really thinned out. That's always been like a big kind of nostalgic thing for me, is like the tones from the 90s to me were always like in opposition to the 80s.
So, by the time people hear this episode, the album will be out. What do you have planned for the rest of the year? Is there anything you're working on that you want people to know about?
Yeah, I'm actually in the middle of working on a new music project with an individual, my buddy Dylan. Dylan has actually studied recording techniques out in California. So he's a lot more versed in analog compressors. He's got like $10,000 worth of studio equipment. He actually has like a studio based out of East Hampton. And he's an incredible musician. And we're working on a project that we don't have a name for it yet, but we're a couple tracks into it, and it's really interesting. It's taking a lot of inspiration from my Italian heritage and the region that my family was from in Italy, from Campania. So there's a lot of Italian traditional folk tones, specifically Southern Italian folk tones that are coming from it, tarantella, pizzica, but it's combining some of my strange droning and psychedelic qualities into it, things that I always kind of wanted to hear in that kind of music, to give it kind of, I don't know, the creepiness that I've always found kind of like whimsically evil in some like Italian folk stories. So I've been really looking forward to that. There's like almost like a Swans element to it. It's pretty neat.
What's the project called?
We don't know yet. We've no idea yet.
Okay.
It's kind of just it's a thing that we're doing, and as we're developing sounds for it, we're thinking about different kind of things to call the project, but we figured that the name would just like reveal itself once we were like, closer towards the ending turn of it. It's a lot more methodical and intricate than some of the ways that I've made music in the past, but that's because some of it is literally like a study of this particular material, because I'm trying my best to be respectful to the culture and, kind of the tip of the hat to my grandmother. And then outside of music, I'm working on my next novel. And yeah, just kind of preparing for everything else that's kind of coming in the world at the moment, I guess.
And as far as your other musical projects, like Pando and Unfold, is it more of like when the mood strikes you, you work on new material?
Yeah, pretty much. Pando is only done with Matt. I won't release anything under Pando without Matt. It just doesn't feel appropriate. Like what Pando essentially is just basically like the embodiment of sound that is me and Matt's friendship. Unfold is essentially like an experiment with sonic tones and recording like really, really loud sonic tones. So that's more of a study. I think that there's a difference between music that you listen to and music that you study. Like, over all kinds of music, what I listen to the most, surprisingly, is not metal at all. I barely listen to metal in my day-to-day. More often, I listen to jazz music. And I listen to jazz music because I don't understand it. And I really like that I don't understand it. I like that I can't grasp what's happening in it. So it's constantly interesting to me. And I think like bands and music that is like technically really articulate, like Gorguts and stuff like Necrophagist, which it's like really technical death metal kind of stuff, is interesting and good to study. I don't think it necessarily gives like a good listen. I like things with groove and stuff like that.
Right.
So I feel the same way when it comes to any kind of music that I make. So it depends on whether or not I'm in the mood to study something or if I'm in the mood to feel something.
So we spoke a bit about your novel with Teeth. Do you have a publication date in mind or a time that you want to have the novel completed?
It's with Teeth is totally done. I'm actually in the process of just sending it out to literary agents at the moment.
Okay.
I've thought about kind of publishing it through like self-publishing or an indie publisher, but I spent like 7 years on it, so it just doesn't feel it doesn't feel like it would do it justice to just kind of publish it myself and kind of be at the whim of social media and everything. I try my best not to be on social media. I think I would be terrible at self-promotion anyway. So, yeah, I think it just depends on whether or not I'm able to pick up a publisher, and then I kind of just go from there.
Is that process a lot like finding a label? Is it just submitting it to people and finding somebody who's interested?
No, it's way more intensive. I feel like a label, you can kind of get lucky and you kind of just like put it out into the world, and if somebody likes it, it's pretty easy for them to kind of like pick it up. There's tons of underground labels. That's what Aesthetic Death is. So there's a lot more out there that are willing to just like, yeah, I'll press it to a couple CDs or something like that and just kind of like see what happens. There's less like middleman parts, whereas when it comes to the business side of creating a book, you can't just like go right through the publishing company. Like there's like 4 major publishing companies, and they will only accept from a literary agent, and they kind of like have a hand in all these other like side labels and everything like that. So it's like you have to research different agents to determine whether or not only it's something marketable for them, but also if your personality will jive with them, because this is ideally somebody that you'll be working with for not only this publication, but like future publications. So you're kind of like researching people. It's almost like having to not only sell your book, but like sell yourself and determine whether or not the place that you're applying to is going to like be a cool place to hang out with.
Is it kind of like you look for authors who have a similar vibe to you or work in a similar genre and then approach the literary agents that way?
Sort of, yeah. Like that's like a good way to kind of approach it. Like a lot of it is looking up kind of like some of the authors that you've enjoyed and seeing who their literary agents were that helped them get their book published, and reaching out to them or seeing if they have an agency and going through them. A lot of it is just kind of cycling through the internet and just trying your best to see who's putting up and looking for different things. A lot of literary agents will like throw out, they have like a wish list of things that they're particularly interested in. And you have to kind of see if whatever it is that you made fits with what they're looking for. So it's a lot of research.
Cool. Maybe we'll have to have you back on when the novel comes out.
That'd be awesome.
So by the time people hear this episode, Showing Teeth will be out through Aesthetic Death. Adam, please tell everyone how they can order the album. What's the best way to get it?
So you can order it online from the Aesthetic Death website. You can purchase the physical CD, the physical copies through Aesthetic Death. You can also get it on my personal Bandcamp, which is cavedweller3.bandcamp.com. Or you can get it from, I have a second Bandcamp that actually has all of my material, not just Cave Dweller, but everything that I've ever put out between Unfold, Salt on Sunday, Pando, and everything in between on adamrbryant.bandcamp.com.
Do you do merch? I mean, you don't play live shows, so I don't know if merch is something that you're interested in.
I don't, but if you think that people will buy a t-shirt with my face on it or something, cool. Maybe I'll strive for that.
Or maybe the album artwork. Yeah. Aesthetic Death is putting out a physical release, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just a CD, or is there going to be a vinyl down the road as well?
I would love for there eventually to put out a vinyl. And I know that with this next project that I'm working on with Dylan, he's only going to like strive for it to be vinyl. But I think for the most part, Aesthetic Death basically just works with CDs. I don't think they do much pressing for vinyl because of the cost of vinyl. I know that Esoteric, the Funeral Doom band, which is kind of like Aesthetic Death's big boy band on their label, they're one of the only ones that I've seen really press anything to vinyl other than like maybe like 2 or 3 oddball bands on there. But he's such a small label that it always depends on, you know, the way that it sells and everything. So maybe if the CD sells really well, he'll consider pressing it to vinyl. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. How do you get in touch with you? I don't actually know much about Aesthetic Death through one of their promotional companies that works for them. They've been sending me music. I don't know much about the label. They have an interesting roster, though.
Yeah. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have no idea. Like,
okay.
We kind of just like, we knew about Bandcamp. So when we came out with the first Pando record, we put it up on Bandcamp and we just kind of saw whatever the hell happened with 0 expectations. We didn't think that anything was going to happen at all. And then we got reached out to by this guy from Portugal who worked for Terrorizer magazine. And he loved the album. He actually tried to get us to come out to Roadburn Fest. But me and Matt are like fucking poor. So
right, yeah.
we can't afford like, you know, tickets and for a plane and then like, you know, room and board and stuff like that. And like to be able to bring all our equipment and everything. So we just couldn't do it, which sucks. But like that guy kind of was the catalyst for getting kind of the attention to a couple different places. And I think there were like 2 or 3 different labels that reached out to us, but we didn't like the contracts. They were a little sketchy. So then Stu from Aesthetic Death reached out to us and kind of told us that we were allowed to do whatever we wanted for our art on the album, which me and Matt, both being like really huge, you know, visual art nerds, him especially because he's a sculptor. That was the thing that kind of made us go like, oh, hell yeah. And so Stu's awesome. You know, the way that he runs the record is definitely different than what a lot of labels do, but it's because he's trying his best to kind of like maintain that kind of underground DIY 90s aesthetic that came with, you know, being able to just like trade CDs with people and everything. It's really awesome.
Yeah. Very cool label.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Bandcamp pages. If people want to get updates on future projects, your novel, or anything like that, what's the best way to follow you online?
Probably the adamrbryant.bandcamp page. And I also think I have like a Facebook that's the same, Adam R. Bryant on Facebook, for any of the materials and stuff that I put out. I originally had like independent Facebook pages for every one of my projects, but I don't like keeping it all in the same project, especially since they're all different kind of genres and types of music. So instead, I just consolidated it all under my name, and whatever project that I put out, I usually put up any kind of information that I'm working on there.
Adam, it was really nice talking to you, and I appreciate you making time for me. This was a little bit of a last-minute thing. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else you want the listeners to know?
No, I think that's it, man. Thanks a lot for like doing this. This was great.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you.
How humorous are the 4? Black bile smitten and fumed.